Today we're talking about Chapter 9, Cognition and Perception. Let's go ahead and get started. Maybe, there we go, okay. When stimuli are grouped according to the perceived similarity of their attributes, it is called a taxonomic categorization strategy. Taxonomic categorization answers are especially common among Westerners. Go away.
Without investment, life-changing medical breakthroughs slow down. Cities banking markets and services businesses deliver global financial solutions that help a client like Amgen innovate without delay. City.
Just after sunrise in the Japanese countryside. No alarm clock needed. The Yokobori family feeds their flock of chickens, feeding themselves freshly laid eggs. French toast for breakfast, bread baked on a wood-burning stove. Wood they chopped from cedar forests surrounding their home. 10 years ago, Miho was an office worker in Tokyo. Today, she's a homemaker. Former graphic designer Hirohito, now a woodworker. The couple runs a small bed and breakfast. For them, city life lost its luster in 2011. Japan's massive earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown paralyzed Tokyo.
Everyone was panicking, so it was like a war, although I've never experienced war.
Did something change fundamentally for you after that disaster?
After that, I have to live the life.
A new life in the mountains of Nara Prefecture. Their home, miles from the nearest train station. Around here, you need a car to get around.
It's so beautiful, but you're so far away from all of the 24/7 convenience of Japanese city life.
They moved to Kawakami Village, a tiny township tucked away on windy roads. The trees taller than most buildings. When the young couple got to know their neighbors, they got quite a shock.
Did you guys know before moving out here that the average age was as old as it is?
No.
You didn't know?
The mayor tells me more than half the village is over 65.
40 年前ね, 40 years ago, the population was around 6,000. Today, it's 1,156.
The village population plunging faster than anywhere else in Japan. Some say it's in danger of disappearing for good. As people pass away, abandoned homes sit empty. Others sit underwater, casualties of a dam and reservoir finished a decade ago.
When you see the prediction of under 300 people living here 20 years from now, what do you do as mayor to try to stop that from happening?
I'm not optimistic, but I don't think it will be that bad. I believe that people should live in such a nice place.
The population data is dire, and not just in Kawakami Village. Nearly every local government in Japan predicts a lower population and higher average age by 2045. Entire villages on the verge of extinction. Japanese society is shrinking and aging so fast, its future survival is at stake. I'm going to one of the few places in Japan with population growth. You can probably guess where it is.
For decades, Japanese young people have been fleeing their small rural towns, lured by the draw of big cities like Tokyo and Osaka, all of them connected by the bullet train.
But there's no magic bullet for Japan's population problems. Even in Tokyo, the towers are high, birth rates hit record lows. Japan's population plummeting for more than 5 years. If the trend continues, experts fear it will fall past the point of no return, with too few women of childbearing age.
Why are so few women in Japan having children?
People usually for now don't have money.
Many don't have time either, says this Tokyo gynecologist.
Is life here in Tokyo too busy for a lot of people to find a partner?
Working in the not office and at home, so very difficult to meet other people.
It sounds like there's a lot of lonely people in this big, massive city.
Yeah, it's so I can so feel.
Things are so bad, Tokyo's government is starting to subsidize egg freezing, hoping working women today become working moms tomorrow. New parents in Japan already get a baby bonus, thousands of dollars to cover medical costs. For singles, a state-sponsored dating service powered by artificial intelligence. So far, boosting Japan's birth rate has been a losing battle. The Yokoboris are doing their part.
So when he was born, he was the first child in this village in how many years?
25 years.
25 years.
Their neighbor, a lifelong villager, says Kentaro's birth boosted everyone's spirits.
Kentaro, he calls me Grandpa. My grandson lives in Kyoto, and I don't get to see him much.
It sounds like Kentaro has a lot of adopted grandparents here.
I think so. I really think it's a big deal.
Also a big challenge, raising a child in the mountains, no neighborhood kids to play with, just 6 children in his kindergarten class 30 minutes away. The nearest high school, more than 2 hours away.
Oh, man. We'll do the best we can, but the rest is up to Kentaro.
Both say it's okay if their son decides to leave someday. Population data does show more young people moving to the countryside, lured by the low cost of living, clean air, and low-stress lifestyle. The key question, is Japan doing enough to pull up its plunging population before it's too late? Will Ripley, CNN, Nara Prefecture, Japan.
Well, one thing
The
they
Red
didn't
Crescent says
talk
one is
about.
really a strike on a school lunch.
One thing they didn't talk about was the fact that between 25 and 30% of Japanese 30-year-olds are virgin, and that is something that that's the Japanese part of the Japanese culture. So let's go ahead and look at this one. I can make it work.
Without investment, life-changing medical breakthroughs slow down. Cities, banking, markets, and services businesses deliver global financial solutions that help a client like Amgen innovate without delay. Citi.
Lee Se-yeon empties a box of toys onto the living room floor for her boys, hoping to catch a few moments for herself. She used to work in a brokerage firm before launching her own startup. She's not worked in 7 years and feels South Korean society no longer appreciates her. We need to recognise that parenting is a new career, she says. The current social climate is that parenting is the beginning of a career break. Lee says her husband wants to help more, but the business culture here means the job does not end when the office closes. A patriarchal society that is slow to evolve still largely sees the mother staying home to care for the children and the father going out to work, contributing to the lowest birth rate of any country in the world. President Yoon Suk-yeol visited a nursery recently, pledging new parental benefits and the creation of a new committee to come up with fresh ideas. At a baby fair outside Seoul, we met expectant parents who were less than enthused. Kim Min-jong is expecting her second child in November. She hasn't worked since her first child, but she says help or good childcare is too expensive.
There is no change in how much money we're getting. They've changed the names and merged allowances. But for parents like us, there are no more benefits.
Having a baby is very much expected for married couples in South Korea, and single mothers are treated differently.
We still have a very kind of puritanical approach to single mothers. It's as if they have done something wrong by becoming pregnant out of wedlock.
Add to that the astronomical cost of housing, here in Seoul in particular, the cost of education and growing economic concern among the youth.
and you have the perfect storm. What it means for South Korea and its aging population is a looming shortage of workers to pay into the pension system.
There's also a growing number of women who have no interest in getting married or having babies for personal or societal reasons. Lee Jun-song has written books about wanting to live alone.
In Korea, there is a joke like an urban legend. If you're not dating by the time you're 25, you'll turn into a crane, meaning if you're single, you become non-human. Korean women have come to realize that marriage imposes too much work on them. Marriage, childbirth, and childcare require too much sacrifice on women.
Lee says it's an issue the government does not understand, a problem that will not get better simply by throwing money at it. Paula Hancock's CNN Seoul.
Lowest birth weight
The Red
in the
Crescent
world.
says one Israeli airstrike.
There you go. Okay. Anyway, okay. I just thought that was interesting. Maybe. There we go. Thematic categorization strategies where stimuli are grouped together on the basis of causal, temporal, and spatial relationships. Thematic categorization is especially common in East Asia. This difference in categorization strategies reflects an underlying difference in the ways that people attend to their worlds, as we just saw. Analytic thinking is characterized by a focus on objects and their attributes. Objects are perceived as existing independently from their context. They are understood in terms of their component parts. Context is very important. The attributes that make up objects are used as basis for categorizing them, and a set of fixed abstract rules is used to predict and explain the behavior of these objects. Analytic thinking is more common in Western countries than in China, Japan, and Korea. Holistic thinking is characterized by an orientation to the context as a whole. It represents an associative way of thinking, which gives attention to the relations among objects and the surrounding context. In holistic thinking, objects are understood in terms of how they relate to the rest of the context, and their behavior is predicted and explained in the basis of those relationships. Holistic thinking also emphasizes knowledge gained through experience rather than the application of fixed abstract rules. Holistic thinking is more common in East Asia. Analytic thinkers tend to show field independence. They can separate objects from their background fields. Holistic thinkers tend to show field dependence. They tend to view objects as bound to their background. And of course, if you look at this picture, this is a picture of Michael Jackson. And of course, she's holding a mirror in front of her. And it looks like she doesn't have a torso. East Asians have been socialized from such a young age to attend to relationships that they do so unconsciously scanning scenes. Westerners have been socialized to attend to focal objects, and they thus habitually tend to direct their attention at such objects. Looking at the art of East Asia, we can see that the art is very different from Western art. East Asian art is painted with a higher horizon, creating more context in the picture. In their portraits, the background is much more complex, and the figures in paintings are smaller than in Western art. And these, of course, this is a picture from Japan, and this is a picture from China. And there we go. China. Japan. From the Louvre. You can see how we look more at people. Masuda and Gonzalez and colleagues in 2008 had American and East Asian students draw landscapes with a person, river, 3 houses, and a horizon. They were seeking to see the difference between the two groups. And this is from the American perspective. And that's from the Japanese perspective. East Asians drew a horizon that was significantly higher in the picture than it was for Americans. East Asians tended to provide a more complex background in their drawings. East Asians included 75% more contextual objects than did the Americans. East Asians were more likely than Americans to situate their objects in context. When East Asians take photographs of others, they tend to include more background. They also tend to have smaller figures in their portraits compared to Americans. And these are pictures from Asia, obviously. And there's an American picture, two more American pictures, not so much background, more American pictures. When Masada Gonzalez and colleagues in 2008 looked at American and East Asian Facebook pages, they found that East Asian photos had smaller figures and larger backgrounds compared to American photos. Looking at Japanese photographs of buildings, researchers discovered that these photographs had more boundary structures than American photographs. This is in Japan. Physical landscapes from Japan are literally busier than landscapes in the United States. Two more pictures from Japan. More pictures from Japan. From the United States. More pictures from the United States. And there you go, the Chrysler Building in New York City. Since cities in East Asia tend to be more crowded than Western cities, living in the busier physical environment fosters the ability to attend to a lot more information at once. When they looked at how scientists from East Asia presented their findings on posters, they had busier posters with more words than North American participants. And this is an Asian poster. Oh, I'm sorry, that's an Asian poster. This is an American poster. There you go. Researchers looked at government and university websites in East Asia and North America. The Asian websites were much longer than the North American websites and had significantly more links and words. The East Asian websites were busier, with more information for people to navigate. Researchers discovered that Westerners were more likely to explain people's behaviors in terms of their underlying dispositions, while East Asians and possibly people from other cultures were more likely to explain people's behaviors in terms of contextual variables. When people from India and the United States were asked to describe a person, the Americans were more likely to describe people in abstract personality traits, and Indians describe people in concrete behaviors they observed. She is friendly. She brings cakes to my family on festival days. Researchers analyzing news stories of murders in the United States, China, and Japan discovered that East Asian papers described the murders in situational terms. The murderer had a rivalry with another student. They had been recently fired. The American reports tried to interpret the situation from a dispositional point of view. The murderer had a very bad temper. The shooter was described as mentally unstable. Personality information is not seen as equally important for explaining the behavior of others in all cultural contexts. Westerners tend to use personality information more for understanding others and themselves than East Asians do. People from many other non-Western cultures show a pattern of focusing on situation rather than disposition, similar to East Asians. Religious groups differ in their attributions as well. American Protestants are more likely than American Catholics to make dispositional attributions. This difference between sects appears to be a function of Protestants having a greater commitment to the idea that people have individual souls. If people believe that people are judging them on the basis of what their soul has done, it follows that they are more likely to view the soul as being the cause of an individual's behavior. I like that. Jesus is coming. Look busy. People's socioeconomic status predicts the kinds of attributions that people make. Working class Americans make more situational attributions and fewer dispositional attributions than middle class Americans. The same kinds of class differences in explaining other people's behaviors have also been found in France. The same kinds of class differences in explaining other people's behaviors have also been found in Russia. The same kinds of class differences in explaining other people's behaviors has also been found in India. If analytic thinkers tend to view the world as operating to a set of universal abstract rules and laws, they will apply these rules and laws when trying to make sense of a situation. This is termed rule-based reasoning. Holistic thinkers should be more likely to make sense of a situation by considering the relationship among objects and events. They should look for evidence of events clustering together, such as similarity among events or of temporal contiguity of events. This is termed associative reasoning. Westerners appear to view change as occurring in linear ways. Change appears in static and predictable ways. Stocks rise after an election. Stocks will rise in 2020. East Asians and 2024. East Asians believe that change happens in fluid and unpredictable ways. The Chinese story of unpredictability. One day, an old farmer's horse ran away from him. His neighbors came by to comfort him, but he said, "How can you know this isn't a good thing? My horse running away." A few days later, his horse came back, bringing a wild horse with it. His neighbors came to congratulate the old man, who said, "How can you know this isn't a bad thing?" A few weeks later, the old farmer's son was trying to ride the wild horse and fell off, breaking his leg. When the neighbors came over to express condolences, the old man said, "How can you know this isn't a good thing?" The next month, a war broke out, and all the able-bodied young men were recruited to fight it. The old farmer's son did not have to go because of his broken leg and survived with his father. And there you go. It was a good thing that he fell off the horse and broke his leg. East Asians have been known to place more value on things that have happened in the past compared with the future. The opposite is found in North America. Attitudes toward the future vary across cultures, and East Asians have quite different expectations and predictions about the future compared with Westerners. Creativity is a generation of ideas that are novel, useful, and appropriate. Westerners prefer novel objects more than East Asians. They generate a larger number of ideas when they are primed with individualistic thoughts than collectivistic ones, and the Asian Americans show more divergent thinking when primed with American culture compared with Asian culture. The novelty part of the equation appears to be facilitated by individualism and Western cultural experiences. Good creative ideas involve novel solutions that are appropriate for the problem at hand. Collectivism appears to be associated with the generation of useful rather than novel ideas. In collective contexts, people are socialized to be concerned about the opinions of others and to find solutions that will fit with the goals of the members of the group. Whereas in an individualistic society, of course, they are looking for a novel approach and they don't care what other people think. When Singaporeans were assigned to work together, researchers discovered that they were more likely to comment on appropriateness of their ideas than when they worked by themselves. Their ideas became less original in groups. When the same research was done in Israel, they found that the Israelis were not affected by the presence of others in the same way. When the same research was done in the Netherlands, they found that the Dutch were not affected by the presence of others in the same way. When the same research was done in Korea, they found that the Koreans reacted more similarly to the Singaporeans than the Israelis and the Dutch. More collectivistic East Asian cultures, with their emphasis on useful ideas, are more likely to foster incremental innovations, whereas more individualistic Western cultures, with their emphasis on novel ideas, encourage more breakthrough ideas. Japan is the world leader in terms of the number of patents it receives each year. Most of the patents represent incremental improvements, particularly in telecommunications, information technology, and electronics. And these are two of the Japanese inventions. This is a hat that you can go to sleep on the subway. And here's if you're standing on the subway, this will keep you from falling over, I guess, when you're asleep. Talking and language have held a privileged position in much of Western intellectual history. Among the ancient Greeks, Homer concluded that there was no greater skill than to be a good debater, and Socrates thought that knowledge existed within people and could be revealed only through verbal reasoning. In Judeo-Christian beliefs, the word was viewed as sacred because of the divine power to create. In the United States, the freedom to speak one's mind is a birthright protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution, and it's known as free speech. Speaking is valued in the West because it is viewed as an act of self-expression and as inextricably bound to thought. In many East Asian cultural traditions, there has been less emphasis on talking, if not outright suspicion, of the spoken word. And this is a Laotian proverb: listen with one ear, be suspicious with the other. Lao Tzu wrote, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." Practitioners of many Eastern religions pursue truth through silent meditation rather than through spoken prayer. A Korean proverb states, "An empty cart makes more noise." Eastern cultural traditions have not cultivated a belief that thought and speech are closely related. Japanese mothers have been shown to speak less to their children than American mothers. Chinese infants as young as 7 months have been shown to vocalize less in response to laboratory events than European American infants. Much of what is communicated in the course of a conversation goes beyond the actual words that are used and is expressed in nonverbal gestures, facial expressions, and voice tone. People seem to be easier to upset in an email than when you are face to face with them. They can't see your smile and wink. People often resort to adding emoticons or abbreviations to their email or text messages to add the nonverbal contextual cues that are lacking in emails or text messages. Nonverbal communication is important in all cultures, but there are some rather pronounced cultural differences in the degree to which communication relies on explicit verbal information versus more implicit nonverbal cues. In high-context cultures, people are deeply involved with each other, and this involvement leads them to have much shared information that guides their behavior. Much of what is to be communicated can be inferred because people have a great deal of information in common that they can rely on, and thus they can be less explicit in what they say. East Asians are good examples of high-context cultures. Western and English-speaking countries are generally good examples of low-context cultures. What is conveyed in a verbal communication in East Asian languages is less explicit than what is communicated in English, so we use a lot more words. They don't talk as much. The words that are said in Japan are often less important than the way that they are said. A pause and a strained look on the face of a Japanese speaker communicates that the information they have is dissatisfying, no matter what the words they use. The key information is conveyed non-verbally, with the content of the words sometimes being rather empty. And if you've ever seen Mr. Baseball, then there's no reason why you shouldn't. But that is fairly obvious in Mr. Baseball. We had a problem during World War II. We had a difficult time interpreting what the Japanese were thinking or what they were doing, because we're straightforward people. We say what we mean, but the Japanese, not so much. Since so much is conveyed through nonverbal communication by the Japanese, they tend to have far more trouble leaving messages on answering machines. They're more selective of their wording because they are visualizing how the person on the other end is receiving their message. And that's it. So I'll talk to you next week.